Night fell over Fort Irwin like a curtain dropping on a stage. The California desert held its breath. Inside the mess hall, 15 Marines lay unconscious across tables and chairs, arranged almost peacefully as if they had simply chosen to sleep where they sat. On the wall above them, written in what looked like blood but smelled like paint, 4 words dripped down the concrete. "You lived. Ask WHY." Security footage would later show a figure in black, small and efficient, moving through the frame for exactly 3 seconds before vanishing into shadow. The radio crackled once with static, then a voice, calm and female, almost bored. 17 down, 103 to go. Then silence. 72 hours earlier, the sound of an axe biting into wood echoed across a valley in Montana, where cell phone towers feared to tread. Victoria Cross stood in front of a cabin that had no address, splitting logs with the kind of precision that came from muscle memory older than thought. She was 37, but looked both younger and older depending on the light. The scar that ran from her left eyebrow to her cheekbone caught the afternoon sun. Her hands, calloused and scarred, moved without hesitation. Chop, stack, chop, stack. The rhythm was meditation. The sound of the axe changed pitch for just a moment, became something else, a sharper crack. The sound a rifle makes when the suppressor is good but not perfect. Victoria's hands froze mid-swing. Her eyes closed. The memory came whether she wanted it or not. Baghdad 8 months ago, rooftop position. Her eye pressed to the scope, watching a woman cross a street 400 meters away. The woman held something against her chest, wrapped in cloth. Intelligence said it was a laptop. Intelligence said she was a courier for ISIS. Intelligence said take the shot. Victoria's finger rested on the trigger. 2 pounds of pressure. That's all it would take. The woman turned slightly and the cloth shifted, and Victoria saw not a laptop but a child. A little girl, maybe 3 years old, sleeping. The radio in her ear. "Cross, you have the shot, confirm kill." Her finger relaxed. "Negative, target is carrying a child. Repeat, civilian child present." The voice came back harder. "That's not your call, Major. Target is confirmed hostile. Take the shot or you will face court-martial." Victoria lifted her eye from the scope, looked at her spotter, said 2 words that ended her career: "Court-martial me." The axe bit into the wood and Victoria opened her eyes. The log split clean down the middle. She breathed out slowly, watching the 2 halves fall apart. 2 weeks after she refused that order, a car bomb killed the woman. She had been innocent, just a mother carrying her daughter home. Victoria had been right. It didn't matter. Right doesn't exist in the language of black operations. There is only the mission and those who complete it. The sound of rotor blades cut through her thoughts. Victoria looked up. A Black Hawk helicopter descended through the valley like a mechanical angel, too loud, too sudden, too urgent. It settled into the clearing 50 yards from her cabin, downdraft whipping dust into small tornadoes. The side door opened and a man stepped out. Colonel Marcus Hale looked like someone had carved him from old leather and hard decisions. 58 years old, hair gone white, eyes that had seen things they could never unsee. He walked toward Victoria with the measured pace of someone who knew he wasn't welcome but was coming anyway. "Vic." She sank the axe into the stump, didn't look at him. "I'm retired, sir. Try the new recruits. They still believe." "I need you." "You need someone expendable. I qualify, but I'm done being expended." Hale stopped 10 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to run if she decided to throw the axe. 4 Americans, 72 hours. After that, they're gone forever. Victoria turned to face him. 4 Americans is a statistic. The military loses people every day. One of them is Jake. The name hit her like a fist to the solar plexus. Victoria's breath caught. She recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. Hale saw it. Hale saw everything. That's what made him dangerous. Jake is dead to me. Has been for 3 years, he made that clear. Hale pulled a USB drive from his pocket, held it out. Watch first, decide second. Victoria didn't move for 10 seconds. The helicopter blades had stopped, but the air still felt like it was spinning. Finally, she took the drive, walked into the cabin. Hale followed without invitation. The cabin interior was exactly what you'd expect from someone who wanted to disappear. One room, wood stove, cot, table, laptop that was 7 years old and worth more than a new one because the old operating system couldn't be hacked by anything current. Victoria plugged in the USB. 4 photographs loaded onto the screen. 4 men, Navy SEALs by the gear in the background. Faces obscured by black bars because this was classified beyond classified. Below each photo a name. The third one read, Lieutenant J. Cross. Victoria's hand moved toward the keyboard, stopped. Cross is a common name. Yes. Could be anyone. Could be. She clicked on the file. More photos loaded. These were surveillance shots, grainy, taken from distance. A Chinese naval vessel. 4 men in American military uniforms, hands zip-tied behind backs, being moved across a deck. One of them turned toward the camera for just a moment. The black bar across his face in the official photo was gone here. The face was older, harder, but unmistakable. Jake, her little brother. The boy she'd taught to shoot when he was 12. The Marine she'd trained alongside in her first deployment. The man who'd told her 3 years ago that he didn't have a sister anymore. Where? Her voice came out flat, professional. The voice she used when emotion was a luxury she couldn't afford. South China Sea, Spratly Island's territorial waters. They were running surveillance on Chinese military installations, got compromised, captured 48 hours ago. Intelligence indicates they're being held on a vessel for the next 72 hours, then transferred to mainland China. Beijing. Once they're there, they disappear into a hole we can't dig them out of. SEAL Team 6. Already mobilizing, but there's a problem. Victoria closed the laptop, stood, walked to the window and looked out at the helicopter. There's always a problem. Chinese intelligence is good, too good. Every time we move assets toward that region, they seem to know. We think there's a leak. Maybe in communications, maybe in personnel, we don't know. But what we do know is that if we send SEAL Team 6 in hot, China will be ready. They'll move the prisoners, kill them, blame it on us. International incident may be worse. So you need a distraction. Hale moved to stand beside her. Not too close. Fort Irwin, biggest training exercise of the year, starts tonight. 120 Marines, 2 sides. U.S. forces versus OPFOR playing Chinese military. Full media coverage. Satellites. Intelligence analysts from 6 countries watching because everyone wants to see how America trains its people. Every eye on American soil will be pointed at that patch of desert. Victoria saw where this was going, saw it like watching a car crash in slow motion. You want someone to crash the exercise, make noise, make it big enough that China's intelligence apparatus focuses on the noise instead of SEAL Team 6. 72 hours, 120 Marines. You infiltrate Fort Irwin, you keep them busy. You make them think they're being attacked by an unknown force. You create chaos, and you don't kill anyone. She turned to look at him. Don't kill anyone. Not one casualty. If you kill someone, even by accident, the exercise gets shut down. Investigation starts. Media goes dark. China's attention shifts back to the South China Sea. Jake dies. Victoria walked back to the table, sat down, opened the laptop again, looked at Jake's face. He'd been 24 the last time they spoke. 27 now, still had the same eyes, their mother's eyes, the eyes that said he'd rather die than quit. Why me? Because you're the best. I'm discharged. Dishonorably, officially, which means you don't exist on any roster. If you're caught, I deny everything. You go to military prison for infiltrating a federal installation. But Jake comes home. And if I succeed? Hale was quiet for a moment. Jake comes home. Victoria stared at the screen, at her brother's face, at the zip ties cutting into his wrists, at the bruise under his left eye. She thought about the last thing he'd said to her, the way he'd looked at her like she was a stranger wearing his sister's face, the door closing, the sound of his truck driving away. 3 years of silence. I need 6 hours to prep, and I want to know who's commanding the exercise at Fort Irwin. Major Rachel Stone, OPFOR commander, former Army Ranger, smart, tough, she won't just roll over. Good, if she was easy this wouldn't work. Victoria stood, closed the laptop, pulled a go bag from under the cot. It was already packed, always had been, old habits. And the U.S. Forces commander. Captain Ethan Sawyer, Marine Infantry, 15 years, by the book. He'll be a problem if he figures out you're not part of the exercise. Then I'll make sure he doesn't figure it out until it's too late. She slung the bag over her shoulder, looked at Hale. If I find out you're lying about Jake being there, if this is just a manipulation to get me back in the field, I will kill you myself. Slowly. Are we clear? Hale met her eyes, crystal. They walked to the helicopter in silence. The pilot didn't look up as they climbed in, didn't speak. That kind of silence meant the mission was already beyond official, already off the books, already the kind of thing that would be denied by everyone from the president down if it went wrong. As the Black Hawk lifted into the Montana sky, Victoria looked down at her cabin, at the chopped wood stacked neatly, at the axe still buried in the stump, at the simple life she'd built from the wreckage of her career. 72 hours, 120 Marines, 0 casualties, and at the end maybe a brother who'd talk to her again, or maybe just a brother who was alive to hate her. She'd take either one. The flight to Fort Bragg took 4 hours with 1 refuel. Hale spent most of it on encrypted calls, speaking in the kind of code that sounded like weather reports but meant life and death. Victoria spent it reviewing files on a tablet, personnel records for the 120 Marines at Fort Irwin, their training scores, their specialties, their weaknesses. Major Rachel Stone's file was impressive. Top of her class at Ranger School, 3 combat deployments, specialty in counterinsurgency. The kind of officer who thought 3 moves ahead and didn't make the same mistake twice. Her photograph showed a woman in her mid-30s with dark hair pulled back tight and eyes that looked like they could see through lies. Captain Ethan Sawyer's file was different, solid, dependable, the kind of Marine who'd walk through fire because the manual said to walk through fire. 2 silver stars, 1 Purple Heart, specialty in direct action. The kind of man who'd never quit but also never adapt, predictable. That made him dangerous in a different way. She memorized faces, names, call signs. By the time the Black Hawk touched down at Fort Bragg, she could have picked any of those 120 Marines out of a crowd and told you their shoe size. The armory at Fort Bragg was underground, 3 levels of concrete and steel that officially didn't exist. Hale led her through security that checked retinas and fingerprints and probably DNA. They descended into fluorescent brightness that hurt after the natural light of Montana. A man waited by an equipment cage. Staff Sergeant Leo Reyes, 32 years old, former student of Victoria's from 7 years ago when she taught close quarters combat. He stared at her like she was a ghost. Major Cross, ma'am, I thought you were. Dead, retired, dishonorably discharged, pick one. They're all true depending on who you ask. Rays unlocked the cage. Inside, weapons and gear hung on racks with the precision of a surgical tray. Victoria moved through it with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. M4 carbine, she checked the action. Smooth. Loaded a magazine, not live rounds. Simunition. Training ammunition that marked hits with paint but didn't kill. The rules of engagement for this mission in physical form. Body armor. Lightweight, black. No markings, no identification. Civilian grade technically but modified in ways that weren't civilian at all. Night vision goggles, 4th generation. The kind that turned night into green day. Climbing gear, rappelling harness. 50 meters of tactical rope. Combat knife. Fixed blade, 7 inches, sharp enough to shave with. And finally, in a case by itself, a small electronic device that looked like an old radio. Victoria picked it up, turned it over in her hands. Rays watched. "Ma'am, is that a radio jammer?" Was a radio jammer, now it's something better. She opened the case. Inside, circuit boards and wiring that she designed herself 8 years ago during a mission in Yemen. It didn't just jam radio frequencies. It intercepted them, recorded them, let her listen to enemy communications in real time. She'd called it the whisper box. Hale had called it illegal under 17 different treaties. She'd used it anyway. Victoria spent the next 3 hours in a corner of the armory, soldering iron in hand, modifying the whisper box, updating it. The technology had changed, but the principles hadn't. Rays brought her coffee twice. She drank it cold both times, too focused to notice temperature. When she finally finished, the sun had set outside. The whisper box was smaller now, fitted into a case the size of a deck of cards. She clipped it to her belt, tested it, picked up radio chatter from base security 3 floors above them, crystal clear. "Ma'am," Ray said quietly, "I heard stories about you, about Task Force Banshee. They said it didn't exist." They were right, it doesn't. But you were part of it. Victoria looked at him. At the young man who'd been 25 when she taught him how to disarm someone twice his size, who'd sent her a letter after she was discharged, thanking her for the training that saved his life in Kandahar, who'd believed in her when the official record said she was a coward who refused orders. "If someone asks, you never saw me. I was never here, this gear was never checked out. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am, but can I ask what you're doing?" Victoria shouldered the gear, checked her watch. 10 hours until insertion, reminding people that training never prepares you for everything. She left the armory without looking back. Hale was waiting by the helicopter, the same pilot, the same silence. They flew west as the sun finished dying, crossed from North Carolina to California in darkness. The landscape below changed from green to brown to nothing. Desert. Fort Irwin sprawled across 2,400 square kilometers of Mojave Desert like a scar on the earth. The National Training Center, where Marines came to learn how to fight in urban environments, in mountain terrain, in conditions that would kill them anywhere else. 120 Marines were down there right now, divided into 2 forces, ready to spend the next 72 hours trying to kill each other with paint bullets and pride. They had no idea what was coming. The Black Hawk didn't land at Fort Irwin, couldn't. That would defeat the purpose. Instead, it dropped Victoria 10 kilometers north of the perimeter at 2200 hours. Full darkness. No moon. Perfect. She hit the ground running. Literally. The helicopter's skids never touched down. She stepped out at 5 feet, absorbed the impact with bent knees, rolled, came up with the M4 in her hands. By the time she looked back, the Black Hawk was gone. Just the sound of rotors fading into the night sky. Then that was gone too. Just desert, just silence, just her. Victoria checked her gear one final time, everything secure, everything silent. She pulled a tablet from her pack, pulled up the satellite map of Fort Irwin she'd memorized. The perimeter was marked in red. Motion sensors every 50 meters, cameras every 100, thermal imaging at key choke points, patrol routes marked in blue, guard rotations marked in green. The whole thing looked impenetrable. That's what made it fun. She moved north, staying low, using the terrain. The desert looked flat but wasn't. Small hills, dry washes, rock formations. She covered the first 5 kilometers in 40 minutes, moving fast but careful. Speed was worthless if you tripped a sensor. At 2300 hours, she reached the perimeter. Chain-link fence, 12 feet high, razor wire on top. Motion sensors mounted every 10 meters, small black boxes that looked innocent but could detect a rabbit at 50 yards. Victoria lay flat in a depression 20 meters from the fence. Watched. Timed the patrol. 2 Marines, young, maybe 22, walking the fence line with the casual confidence of people who'd never seen real combat. They passed her position without looking, without knowing. Their radio chatter was bored, talking about a football game, about a girl one of them met in town, about anything except their job. Victoria pulled out a small drone from her pack, custom-built, wingspan of 8 inches, silent motor. She set it on the ground, activated it with a tap on her tablet. The drone lifted off, flew toward the fence, climbed to 15 feet, hovered over the motion sensors. On her tablet, she watched the sensor readings, waited. The drone dipped suddenly, triggered 3 sensors in a row. Alarms would be going off in the command center right now. The 2 Marines stopped talking, turned, started jogging toward the sensor location. Victoria was already moving. While they focused on where the drone triggered sensors, she ran toward a different section of fence, pulled out a small cutting tool, not bolt cutters, something better, plasma torch the size of a pen. She touched it to the chain link. The metal glowed red, then white, then wasn't there anymore. She cut a hole 3 feet tall in 8 seconds, slipped through, was inside Fort Irwin before the 2 Marines reached the drone. They'd find it eventually, wonder what it was, maybe report it, maybe not. By then, Victoria would be gone. She moved into the base using shadows like they were old friends. Buildings loomed dark against darker sky. The OPFOR base was designated red zone on the map. 100 sleeping Marines who thought they were safe because they were in the middle of a U.S. military installation, surrounded by motion sensors and armed guards. They were about to learn different. The first 2 guards stood outside a supply building. Routine watch, 4-hour shift. They looked alert for the first hour, she guessed, then bored, then just trying to stay awake. She watched them from behind a vehicle, calculated angles, approach vectors, timing. The sound of boots on gravel is distinctive. Victoria knew this. So she didn't walk on gravel. She walked on dirt, on sand, on nothing. Her approach was silent not because she was quiet, but because she understood that sound travels and silence is just another tool. The first guard never saw her. She came from his 6 o'clock, used a sleeper hold she'd learned from a Japanese instructor who'd worked with Yakuza before working with JSOC. 4 seconds of pressure to the carotid artery. The guard went limp. Victoria lowered him gently to the ground, checked his pulse, strong, steady. He'd wake up in 15 minutes with a headache and a story nobody would believe. The second guard turned at the sound of something that wasn't there, saw his partner on the ground, reached for his radio. Victoria was faster. She covered the distance in 3 strides, used a pressure point strike to the radial nerve that made his arm go numb, caught the radio before it hit the ground, used her free hand to apply the same sleeper hold. He fought for maybe 2 seconds. Then he was down. She dragged both guards into the shadow of the supply building, arranged them so they looked like they'd sat down for a break, pulled out a spray paint can, fluorescent orange, wrote on the wall above them in letters 6 inches tall, 2 down 118 to GO. Then she pulled out the whisper box, activated it, tuned to the base security frequency. Listened. The voice that came through was female, calm, professional, Major Rachel Stone. Security Team 3, report status. Silence, Victoria smiled. Security Team 3 was currently sleeping. Stone's voice again. Security Team 3, respond immediately. More silence. Then in the background someone else. Younger voice, Lieutenant maybe. Ma'am, Team 3 is not responding. Should I send someone to check? Affirmative. Team 7, proceed to Team 3's last known position. Report what you find. Victoria was already moving. She'd be long gone before Team 7 arrived, but she left them something to find. Another message, another clue, another reason to panic. She moved deeper into the OPFOR base, past barracks where Marines slept, past armories where weapons were locked, past command buildings where officers would soon be very awake and very angry. She moved like smoke, like memory, like something that was there and then wasn't. The mess hall sat at the center of the base. Large building, kitchens, dining area. Right now at 23:40 hours it should have been empty, but it wasn't. Through the windows Victoria counted 15 Marines, late-night shift workers, cooks preparing breakfast for 0500, security doing rounds, people who were awake when they should have been asleep. She could avoid them, should avoid them, but the mission wasn't about avoiding. The mission was about creating chaos, and 15 targets in one location was too good to pass up. The ventilation system for the mess hall was old, 1980s construction, big air ducts, easy access panels. Victoria climbed onto the roof, found the intake vent, opened it with a screwdriver from her pack. Inside, her hand found what she needed, a small canister, medical-grade sedative in aerosol form, not illegal, not exactly. She'd liberated it from a hospital in Kandahar 5 years ago during an operation that officially never happened. The sedative was designed to calm violent patients. In the right concentration, it would put someone to sleep for 20 minutes. No harm, no memory, just sleep. She attached the canister to the ventilation intake, set a timer, 5 minutes. That would give her time to get in position. She climbed down, moved to the mess hall's side entrance, waited. The timer hit 0. She didn't hear the canister release, that was the point. But through the window she watched the Marines inside, watched them slow down, watched confusion cross their faces, watched them sit down, one by one, slumping, sliding. 15 bodies finding chairs, finding tables, finding the floor. Victoria waited 3 more minutes, making sure. Then she entered through the side door. 15 Marines sleeping peacefully. She checked each one, pulses strong, breathing normal. They'd wake up confused but fine. She arranged them carefully, some in chairs, heads on tables, some on benches looking like they'd just dozed off during a break, making it look almost natural, almost. Then she went to work on the message. The spray paint came out again. But this time she found something better in the kitchen. Food coloring, red food coloring. Mixed with water, it looked exactly like blood. She wrote on the wall in letters 2 feet tall, "You lived. Ask WHY." Below that, 17 down 103 to GO. She set up her tablet on a counter, hacked into the mess hall's security camera, started it recording. Then she pulled out a small radio transmitter, military grade, illegal for civilians to own. She set it to broadcast on all Fort Irwin frequencies, pressed record. Her voice came out calm, almost bored. 17 down, 103 to go. Sleep well, Marines, tomorrow will be harder. She uploaded the message, set it to broadcast on a loop. Then she left through the same side door, moving fast now, because in about 30 seconds, every officer at Fort Irwin would hear that message and all hell would break loose. She was 200 meters away when the base alarm started screaming. Lights flooded on. Voices shouted. Boots hit pavement. The hunt had begun. Victoria moved through shadows that weren't there anymore, using the light itself now, the way it created new darkness in unexpected places. She reached the perimeter fence, found a drainage pipe she'd marked earlier, slid into it. The pipe ran under the fence, part of the base's water management system. She crawled through 200 meters of concrete tube that smelled like rust and regret. When she emerged on the other side of the fence, she was technically outside Fort Irwin, technically not in the exercise zone, technically invisible. She climbed a small hill 300 meters from the base, set up an observation position, pulled out night vision binoculars, watched. Fort Irwin was alive now, every light on, vehicles moving, Marines assembling. She watched Major Rachel Stone emerge from a building pulling on body armor over her uniform. Watched Captain Ethan Sawyer arrive in a Humvee already geared up. Watched them meet. Watched them argue. Even from 300 meters, the body language was clear. Stone wanted to lock down the base. Sawyer wanted to hunt the intruder. They were both wrong, or both right. Didn't matter. What mattered was that they were divided, uncertain, reacting. Victoria pulled out her satellite phone, encrypted, untraceable, called the only number in its memory. Hale answered on the first ring. Status: 17 down, 0 casualties. 103 very angry Marines now know someone's inside their perimeter. How's the other operation? SEAL Team 6 is in position. Chinese satellites are currently focused on Fort Irwin. CNN is running the story about unusual activity at the National Training Center. Beijing is watching. You bought us time. How much time do I need to buy? 72 hours. Can you hold that long? Victoria looked through the binoculars. Watched Stone organize Marines into search teams. Watched Sawyer pull up a map and start designating sectors. They were good. They were trained. They were 103 against 1. I can hold. Vic, about Jake, there's something you should know. Something in Hale's voice made her stomach tighten. What? The file I gave you. It wasn't complete. I couldn't tell you everything because I knew you wouldn't take the mission if you knew how personal it was. Marcus, what are you not telling me? Silence on the line. Then, check the file again, the full file, the one that just uploaded to your tablet. I'm sorry, Vic, I needed you to commit before you knew. The line went dead. Victoria pulled out her tablet with hands that wanted to shake but didn't, opened the file, found the folder labeled Classified Addendum. Inside, detailed files on all 4 SEALs. She opened the one labeled LTJ Cross. The photograph that loaded wasn't obscured this time. No black bar, just a face, Jake's face. Older, harder. A scar above his right eye that hadn't been there 3 years ago. Below the photo, more details, service record, deployments. And then in red text, next of kin. There was only one name listed, Victoria Cross, sister, estranged. She read the interrogation reports. The intelligence assessment. Jake had been beaten, not severely. The Chinese wanted information, not corpses. He'd given them nothing. Typical Jake. Stubborn to the point of stupid. Brave to the point of suicidal. Just like when they were kids and he'd refused to back down from bullies twice his size because backing down wasn't in his vocabulary. The last page of the file was a recorded interview. Audio only. Taken by the intelligence officer who debriefed the SEAL team's last contact before they went dark. Victoria pressed play. Jake's voice came through the tablet speaker. Tired, professional. If this mission goes sideways and I don't make it back, I need something on record. There's someone I need to apologize to, my sister. Victoria, I said things 3 years ago that I didn't mean. I was angry, I was wrong. If anyone's listening to this after I'm gone, tell her I'm sorry. Tell her she was right about everything. Tell her. The recording cut off. Victoria realized she'd been holding her breath, let it out slowly, looked back through the binoculars at Fort Irwin, at the Marines searching for her, at the lights, at the organized chaos. 72 hours, 103 Marines, 0 casualties, and at the end maybe Jake would get to tell her he was sorry himself. She packed up her gear, started moving to her next position. The drainage system under Fort Irwin was extensive. She had the maps, she had the access points, and she had 71 hours and 53 minutes to keep 103 Marines so busy they didn't have time to think about anything except finding the ghost in their base. In the distance, she heard Stone's voice over a loudspeaker. "Attention all personnel, we have an intruder in the base. Unknown number, unknown armament, unknown objective. All teams move to search pattern Delta. Find them, bring them in." This exercise just became real. Victoria smiled in the darkness, slipped into a drainage pipe, vanished like she'd never been there at all. Behind her, Fort Irwin burned with light and fury and the knowledge that somewhere in their midst was a threat they couldn't see, couldn't predict, couldn't stop. And the clock was ticking. 12 hours into the operation, Fort Irwin had transformed from a training facility into a war zone that didn't know it was fighting a war. Victoria watched from inside the drainage system, her tablet glowing faintly in the darkness, showing security feeds she'd hacked into 4 hours ago. 34 Marines were down now. 34 paint-marked casualties who'd been found unconscious or simply outsmarted, left with messages that grew increasingly personal. The latest one spray-painted across the armory door, 34 down. I'm just getting started. Major Rachel Stone stood in the command center, her face illuminated by computer screens, looking at footage that made no tactical sense. The intruder moved through their base like water through cracks, appeared in one sector, vanished, reappeared 300 meters away minutes later. No pattern, no predictability, just chaos wrapped in precision. Captain Ethan Sawyer slammed his hand on the table hard enough to make coffee cups jump. This is impossible. One person cannot infiltrate a base of 120 Marines and take down a third of them in half a day. And yet, Stone rewound the footage, pointed. There, mess hall, 17 down in one hit. Here, armory, 5 guards unconscious. Here, vehicle depot, 8 Marines found zip-tied to their own Humvees. One person, Captain, one very good person. Sawyer's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. 15 years in the Marines, 2 combat tour, never lost a firefight, never been outmaneuvered. And now, on American soil in a training exercise, someone was making him look like a recruit fresh out of boot camp. We locked down every building, every access point, forced them into the open. That's what they want. Look at the pattern. Every time we concentrate forces, they hit somewhere else. They're not trying to win, they're trying to exhaust us. A younger voice cut in. Lieutenant Sarah Park, intelligence officer, 28 years old and sharp as broken glass. She'd been studying the footage for 6 hours straight, eyes red from staring at screens. "Ma'am, I found something. The intruder isn't random. Watch." She pulled up a map overlay. Red dots marked where Marines had been taken down. "See the spacing? They're creating a perimeter, not trying to reach the center. They're controlling the edges." Stone leaned closer. Park was right. The hits formed a rough circle around the outer sections of the base, controlling our movement, hurting us. Or buying time. Park pulled up another screen. News feeds, CNN, Fox, BBC, all running the same story. Unusual military activity at Fort Irwin. Speculation about new training protocols. Satellite images showing increased movement. "Ma'am, the whole world is watching us right now. Every intelligence agency, including China. What if this isn't about us at all? What if we're just the distraction? Sawyer and Stone exchanged looks. The kind of look that happens between officers when they realize their pieces on a board being moved by someone they can't see. Sawyer pulled out his secure phone, started to dial higher command. Stone put her hand on his arm. Wait, if this is a sanctioned op, calling command might compromise it. If it's not, we look incompetent. Either way, we lose. So what do you suggest? Stone looked back at the screens, at the red dots, at the messages left behind, at the careful, deliberate pattern of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. We find them. We ask them, directly. In the drainage pipe 300 meters away, Victoria listened to their conversation through the whisper box and allowed herself a small smile. They were good. Better than she'd expected, Park especially. That intelligence officer had a mind that worked 3 steps ahead. Dangerous. Useful. The kind of officer Victoria would have recruited if she were still building teams instead of being a team of one. She checked her watch. 12 hours down. 60 hours to go. Her body was starting to feel it. She'd had maybe 90 minutes of sleep total, taken in 15-minute increments in the spaces between actions. Her hands were steady, but her eyes burned. Dehydration was setting in despite the water she'd rationed. And the mental fatigue of staying 3 steps ahead of 86 very motivated, very angry Marines was like running a marathon inside her skull. The tablet beeped. Encrypted message from Hale. She opened it. 3 words: SEAL team compromised. Victoria's blood went cold. She typed back, explain. The response took 30 seconds, felt like 30 years. Chinese knew about rescue attempt. SEAL Team 6 pinned down on target vessel. Firefight ongoing. Casualties unknown. Need more time. 12 hours minimum. She closed her eyes. Let her head rest against the concrete wall of the drainage pipe. The math was brutal. She'd promised 72 hours. She'd planned for 72 hours. Her body could maybe hold for 72 hours. But 84, 96. Against 86 Marines who were getting smarter, angrier, more organized every hour. She typed Jake's status. Another pause. Then, alive, injured. Chinese using SCALs as shields. Team 6 cannot extract without casualties. Victoria's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She wanted to ask how injured. Wanted to ask if Jake was conscious, if he was in pain, if he'd asked about her. But those questions were weakness, and weakness got people killed. She typed, I'll hold. Get them out. Hale's response, you're running on FUMES. Acknowledge if you need extraction. Victoria thought about the cabin in Montana, the quiet, the wood that needed splitting, the simple life that had no brothers bleeding on Chinese vessels. She thought about Jake's voice on that recording, the apology he'd saved until he thought he might die, the sister he'd cut out of his life because he couldn't understand why she'd chosen morality over mission. She typed negative, continuing mission. Then she closed the connection, sat in the darkness, let herself have 10 seconds of being tired, of being scared, of being human. Then she pushed it all down into the locked box inside her chest where she kept everything that could kill her if she let it out. 86 Marines, 12 more hours minimum, 0 casualties. She packed her gear, checked her remaining supplies, 4 smoke grenades, 2 flash bangs, 1 magazine of simunition, the whisper box, and a combat knife that she hoped she wouldn't need because using it meant something had gone very wrong. She crawled through the drainage system, heading toward a new insertion point. As she moved, she passed under the command center, could hear voices above her, muffled by concrete but distinct. Stone's voice, calm, analytical. We need to think like them. What's the objective? Why 0 casualties? Park's voice, because casualties end the exercise. Media investigation, everything shuts down. They need us active, need us looking. Sawyer, so we give them what they want. We keep looking. But we set a trap they can't resist. Victoria stopped crawling. Listened. This was new. They were adapting. She'd taken down 34 Marines, and instead of demoralizing the rest, she'd made them sharper, more dangerous. Sawyer continued. The one thing we know, they're not trying to kill. They're trying to disable, which means they get close. Very close. We use that. Stone bait. Exactly. We set up a high-value target, make it look vulnerable. When they come for it, we're ready. Not to capture, to contain. We don't chase them through the base. We make them come to us. The voices moved away. Victoria stayed frozen in the pipe. They were learning. The trap Sawyer described was textbook, and it would work. Against a normal infiltrator. Against someone who had to take the bait, but Victoria didn't have to do anything. She just had to buy time. She could avoid every trap, stay in the drainage system, let them search forever while SEAL Team 6 did their work in the South China Sea. Except that wasn't enough anymore. 12 more hours meant she needed to keep them focused, keep them engaged, keep them thinking about her instead of wondering if they were part of something bigger, which meant she had to take the bait even though she knew it was a trap, had to walk into it deliberately, had to trust that she was better than their trap was smart. She emerged from a drainage grate near the eastern perimeter. Dawn was coming, the sky shifting from black to deep blue. She had maybe 40 minutes before sunrise. Darkness was her friend. Light was 86 pairs of eyes that could see her. The bait Sawyer would set would be obvious, too obvious. He'd expect her to see it and avoid it. So he'd set a second trap, the real trap, something subtle, something that looked like an opportunity but was actually a kill box. Victoria needed to figure out what that would be before he finished setting it. Pulled up the base map on her tablet, looked at high-value targets. Command center, too obvious. Armory, already hit. Vehicle depot, already hit. Barracks, too many hostages, too dangerous. Communications center, she stopped, zoomed in. The communications center controlled all radio traffic on base. If someone wanted to really cause chaos, take that down, and 86 Marines become 86 individuals who can't coordinate. It was the perfect bait, which meant it was the trap. But it was also necessary. Victoria needed to send a message, not to Stone or Sawyer, to whoever was feeding information to the Chinese, because Park was right. Someone knew about the SEAL team operation. Someone had leaked, and that someone might be listening to Fort Irwin communications right now, trying to figure out if this chaos was connected to the South China Sea. She had to make them think it wasn't, had to make this look like a rogue operation, personal, unconnected to anything bigger, which meant she needed to broadcast something that would draw attention away from the real mission. The communications center it was, trap and all. She moved through the pre-dawn darkness using the last of the night. The base was quieter now. 86 Marines couldn't maintain full alert forever. Some were sleeping in shifts. Some were posted at static positions. Some were on patrol. Victoria had been tracking their patterns for 12 hours, knew their rotations, knew their gaps. The communications center sat near the middle of the base. Two-story building, reinforced, multiple entrances. And as she approached from 400 meters out, lying flat on a roof she'd accessed through a drainage pipe and some creative climbing, she counted 40 Marines surrounding it. 40, nearly half the remaining force. Sawyer wasn't being subtle, he was being overwhelming. Every approach covered, every angle watched, thermal imaging, motion sensors, trip wires she could see even from this distance. It wasn't a trap, it was a fortress. Come in, the setup said, and you'll never come out. Victoria studied it for 20 minutes, looked for the weakness. There was always a weakness, always a gap, a human error, a technological blind spot, something. She just had to find it before sunrise made her visible to 40 very alert Marines. The weakness wasn't in the perimeter. It was in the assumption. Sawyer assumed she'd infiltrate from outside the perimeter. He'd set up his 40 Marines in a defensive circle facing outward. Classic military doctrine. Defend against the external threat. But Victoria wasn't external anymore. She'd been inside their perimeter for 12 hours. Inside their systems. Inside their heads. She was already in the circle. She just needed to walk to the center. She climbed down from the roof, moved to the barracks, found a laundry room. Inside, uniforms, clean, pressed, ready for Marines who were currently surrounding the communications center. She found a uniform approximately her size, put it on, tucked her hair under a cap. The fit wasn't perfect, but in low light at distance it would pass. She left her gear in the laundry room except for the whisper box and her sidearm loaded with simunition, hidden under the uniform jacket. Then she walked toward the communications center, not sneaking, not hiding, just walking, like a Marine returning from patrol, tired, casual, belonging. She kept her head down slightly. Posture slumped just enough to suggest exhaustion. Every body language cue said, "I'm one of you." She passed the first checkpoint. 2 Marines barely glanced at her, just another body in uniform in a base full of bodies in uniform. She passed the second checkpoint. A corporal looked at her face, started to say something, then got distracted by his radio crackling. She kept walking. 30 meters from the communications center, 20 meters, 10. A voice behind her, "Hey, hold up." Victoria stopped, didn't turn immediately, let a second pass, 2. The kind of pause someone makes when they're tired and it takes a moment to process being addressed. Then she turned slowly. A sergeant stood there, older, maybe 35, eyes that had seen combat. Those eyes were looking at her face with the kind of focus that meant recognition was 3 seconds away. "Do I know you?" The sergeant took a step closer. "You're not in my unit." Victoria's hand moved to her sidearm, drew, fired 3 times, simunition rounds, paint splattered across the sergeant's chest. He looked down, looked up, understanding and anger crossing his face simultaneously. Contact, intruder at communications center. She was already moving, dropped the sidearm, pulled a smoke grenade, threw it. Dense white smoke billowed instantly. She ran toward the communications center entrance. Behind her, shouts, boots on pavement, the sound of 40 Marines converging. She had maybe 10 seconds before the smoke cleared and she was in the open. The communications center door was locked, electronic keypad. She pulled a small device from her pocket. Hale had given it to her, RFID duplicator. She'd cloned a dozen access cards over the past 12 hours just by walking near Marines. She pressed it to the keypad. The lock clicked. She was inside. The interior was chaos. Technicians scrambling, officers yelling into radios, everyone trying to figure out what was happening outside. They turned as Victoria entered, 6 people. None armed, all staring at her. She raised her hands, empty, non-threatening. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just need to borrow your broadcast system for 30 seconds. Lieutenant Park was one of the 6. Recognition flashed across her face. "You, the intruder, you're out of time. Everyone on the floor, now." None of them moved. Park stepped forward. "You walked into a building surrounded by 40 Marines. You're not getting out, so whatever you're doing, it better be worth dying for." Victoria looked at her, really looked, saw the intelligence, the courage, the kind of officer the Marines needed more of. "I'm not dying today, Lieutenant, and neither is anyone else if you do exactly what I say. Floor, now." Park held her gaze for 3 more seconds. Then she nodded to the others. They got on the floor. Park was last. As she knelt, she said quietly, "This is about the SEALs, isn't it? The ones captured in the South China Sea." Victoria moved to the broadcast console, pulled up the controls, started recording. I can neither confirm nor deny. The messages you've been leaving. You lived ask WHY. You're reminding us that you're choosing not to kill, that you could but won't. That's not a tactic, that's a moral code. Which means this isn't about destroying us, it's about distracting us. Smart, too smart. Victoria kept working, found the right frequency, the one that would broadcast to every radio on base and be picked up by monitoring stations outside. You're very perceptive, Lieutenant. And you're running out of time. They're going to breach this building in about 90 seconds. Then I better talk fast. Victoria hit record. Her voice would be scrambled, untraceable. Attention, Fort Irwin. This is the intruder you've been hunting. I want to make something clear. I'm not your enemy. I'm not here to hurt you. Every Marine I've taken down is alive, uninjured, because that's the mission. 0 casualties. You're wondering why. You're wondering what the point is. The point is to prove that superior numbers don't guarantee victory. That training has limits. That there's always someone better. Consider this your education. 48 hours left, 86 Marines remaining. Let's see who learns faster. She stopped the recording, broadcast it. Then she pulled out another device, a small EMP generator, experimental, probably illegal, definitely effective. She set it on the console, set a timer, 3 minutes, enough time for her to be gone. When it detonated, it would fry every electronic system in the building. Communications down, data gone. Their coordination capability crippled. Park watched from the floor. You're good, better than good, who trained you? Someone who believed in me when nobody else did. Someone who taught me that the mission matters but people matter more. Now stay down for 2 more minutes. The device I just activated is going to make your ears ring, but it won't hurt you. Victoria moved to the back of the building, found a window, opened it. The smoke outside was clearing. She could see Marines moving in formation toward the entrance, professional, coordinated. They'd be inside in 60 seconds. She climbed out the window, dropped into an alley between buildings, heard shouting behind her. The drainage grate was 10 meters away. She ran for it. Behind her, someone yelled, "There, east side." Gunfire, simunition rounds, paint splattered on the wall next to her. She dove, rolled, came up running, reached the drainage grate, pulled it open, dropped inside, pulled it closed above her. In the darkness of the pipe, she heard boots running over her head, voices calling coordinates. The organized chaos of 86 Marines trying to catch one ghost. She crawled deeper into the system. Behind her, muffled by concrete, the EMP detonated. Not loud, just a soft whump, but every radio in the communications center just died. Every computer, every electronic system. They could rebuild it, eventually. But for the next few hours, Fort Irwin's communications would be degraded. Manual runners, line-of-sight signals, 19th century tactics in a 21st century war. Victoria allowed herself to stop, to breathe, to take inventory. No injuries, gear intact, mission parameters still valid. She'd taken down 42 Marines, now counting the ones in the communications center, 78 remaining, and she'd sent her message, both to the Marines and to anyone monitoring Fort Irwin frequencies. A rogue operator, a personal vendetta, nothing to do with operations in the South China Sea. The whisper box crackled. She'd left it on the frequency used by SEAL Team 6. Encrypted, secure. Hale's voice came through, "Reaper, we have a problem." Of course they did. There was always a problem. Go ahead. Chinese intelligence intercepted your broadcast. They're analyzing it. If they figure out the timing correlation between your attack on Fort Irwin and our operation in the South China Sea, the whole thing falls apart. Then make sure they don't figure it out. We're trying, but Vic, there's something else. The leak, we found it. It's not coming from our end, it's coming from yours. Victoria froze. Explain. Someone at Fort Irwin has been transmitting data to a Chinese intelligence network. We don't know who, we don't know how long, but they've been sending updates on the exercise, personnel movements, communications, everything. You think they know about me? We think they know someone unauthorized is on base. They don't know why, not yet. But if they start digging, if they connect you to the SEAL operation, Jake dies. All 4 SEALs die, and we potentially have an international incident. Victoria's mind raced through possibilities. A spy at Fort Irwin, someone with access, someone trusted, someone who could transmit data without being caught. That narrowed it down to maybe 20 people, officers, senior NCOs, intelligence personnel. Give me everything you have on the leak, transmission times, data packets, anything. Sending now. Vic, you need to find this person, and you need to stop them without breaking your zero casualty rule. That's not part of my mission. It is now, because if you don't stop the leak, nothing else matters. The distraction fails. SEAL team gets compromised. Jake dies, you die, everyone loses. The connection cut. Victoria sat in the darkness waiting for the file to download to her tablet. A spy. At Fort Irwin. Someone betraying their country for money or ideology or blackmail. Someone who right now was probably reporting everything they knew about the mysterious intruder to handlers in Beijing. The file loaded. She opened it. Transmission logs. The leak had been active for 6 months, sending data every 72 hours like clockwork. Most recent transmission was 8 hours ago. Next one scheduled for 16 hours from now. The transmissions originated from inside Fort Irwin, but the exact location varied. Mobile source. Someone who moved around. Someone who had access to multiple secure locations. Victoria cross-referenced the transmission times with personnel rosters. Looked for who was where when the data went out. The list was long, too long. She needed to narrow it down. She pulled up the content of the transmissions. Technical data, training results, tactical assessments. The kind of information only someone with intelligence background could compile and understand the value of. Intelligence personnel. That narrowed it to 5 people, 3 officers, 2 enlisted. She pulled up their files, started reading, looking for the detail that didn't fit, the explanation that was too smooth, the background that was too clean. And there it was. Second file down. Captain David Chen, intelligence officer, age 32, born in California. Parents emigrated from Taiwan in the 80s. Education at Berkeley. Masters in Asian Studies, recruited by Marine Intelligence straight out of grad school, 12 years of service, clean record, multiple commendations, currently assigned to Fort Irwin as liaison between OPFOR and actual intelligence assets monitoring Chinese military developments. Perfect background, almost too perfect. Victoria dug deeper, found a deployment record from 4 years ago. Chen had been part of an exchange program, 6 months at a NATO intelligence facility in Germany. During that time, he'd had access to classified information about Chinese military capabilities, information that shortly after started appearing in Chinese intelligence assessments. The investigation had gone nowhere. No proof, no evidence, just suspicion. But now, 4 years later, transmissions from Fort Irwin to Chinese handlers. Same pattern, same kind of data, same untraceable methodology. Victoria looked at Chen's current location according to the base roster. Command center, with Stone and Sawyer, with access to everything happening in the hunt for Victoria. Which meant he knew about her, knew about the messages, knew about the chaos. And in 16 hours he'd transmit all of it to Beijing unless she stopped him. The question was how. She couldn't kill him. 0 casualties. She couldn't capture him openly. That would expose the whole operation. She needed to neutralize him quietly, permanently, without anyone knowing until it was too late. She needed leverage, something that would make him choose to stop transmitting, or something that would make his transmissions worthless. She thought about Park, about the intelligence officer who'd figured out Victoria was a distraction. If Park had figured it out, Chen had probably figured it out too, which meant his next transmission would include speculation about the South China Sea connection. Unless Victoria gave him something else to report, something bigger, something that would make Beijing focus on the wrong thing entirely. She started planning. It would require exposing herself more than she wanted, would require taking risks that made the communications center raid look cautious. But it was the only way. She had to become so threatening, so overwhelming, so impossible to ignore that Chen's entire report would be about her, about the mysterious super soldier tearing through Fort Irwin, not about seals in the South China Sea. She checked her remaining supplies: one smoke grenade, one flash bang, half a magazine of simunition, the whisper box, her knife, and her brain, which had always been her best weapon anyway. Victoria crawled through the drainage system toward a new position. The sun was fully up now. The base would be on high alert. Communications degraded but not gone. 86 very angry Marines who now knew she could walk among them in uniform. The difficulty level had just increased exponentially. Good, easy was boring, and boring didn't buy 12 more hours. She emerged near the barracks, changed back into her black tactical gear. The uniform trick would only work once. They'd be checking faces now, verifying identity. She needed a new approach, something they wouldn't expect because it was too bold, too reckless, too impossible. She needed to take down a large group all at once, not the gradual attrition of the past 12 hours, a statement, a show of force that would make Chen's report scream threat assessment rather than strategic analysis. She pulled up the base map, looked for concentrations of Marines, found one, the command center. 40 Marines stationed there now after she'd hit the communications center. Sawyer and Stone would be there, Park would be there, and Chen would be there. 40 Marines, one Victoria in broad daylight in a fortified position. The math was stupid. The tactics were insane, which was exactly why it might work, because nobody would expect it. Nobody would believe she'd even try. She started preparing, pulled out the remaining smoke grenade and flash bang, took them apart. She'd learned this trick from a demolitions expert in Kandahar. You could multiply the effect of a smoke grenade by mixing the compound with certain chemicals. Make one grenade do the work of 5. Same with flash bangs. It required precise ratios, careful handling. One mistake and it would blow up in her hands. She worked in the darkness of a maintenance closet she'd secured, hands steady despite 40 hours without real sleep, mixing compounds, testing reactions on small samples, building something new from something standard issue. 30 minutes later, she had 2 devices that would have made the demolitions expert proud. One super smoke grenade that would blanket an area the size of a football field. One super flash bang that would blind and deafen everyone in a 40-meter radius for 90 seconds. Enough time to walk into the command center. Enough time to paint every person inside with simunition. Enough time to leave a message that would make Chen's report focus entirely on her. She moved toward the command center using the drainage system, emerged 200 meters away. The building was surrounded. Sentries, patrols, overlapping fields of fire. Getting close would be nearly impossible. Getting inside would be suicide, which was why she wasn't going to sneak. She was going to knock on the front door. Victoria pulled out her tablet, hacked into the base PA system, the same system she'd used before. They'd probably secured it after the communications center raid, but secure was relative when you had the kind of technical skills Victoria had acquired over 15 years of black operations. She found the command center's external speakers, set up a recording. Her voice scrambled. "Major Stone, Captain Sawyer, I'm outside your front door. I'm unarmed. I want to talk." You have 60 seconds to decide if you're brave enough to face me." She hit send. The message broadcast from the speakers mounted on the command center's exterior. Inside, she could imagine the chaos, the debate, the tactical assessment. Sawyer would want to attack. Stone would want to understand. They'd argue, waste precious seconds. And while they argued, Victoria would make her move. She pulled out the super smoke grenade, set a 30-second delay, threw it toward the command center's entrance. It landed, rolled, settled, started counting down. She pulled out the super flash bang. No delay on this one. She'd throw it manually. Timing was everything. 20 seconds. Marines near the entrance spotted the grenade, started shouting, moving away. Exactly wrong response. They should have moved toward it, covered it. But training said move away from grenades, and training was a hard habit to break. 10 seconds. Sawyer appeared at the entrance, saw the grenade. His eyes went wide. He started to yell an order, too late. The smoke grenade detonated. Dense white smoke erupted like a volcanic explosion, spread faster than anyone could run. Within 5 seconds, the entire entrance was invisible. Within 10 seconds, the smoke had penetrated inside the command center. Victoria was already moving, running straight into the smoke. Through the flash bang ahead of her, it detonated with a sound like the world ending. Light bright enough to blind through closed eyelids. Sound loud enough to make ears bleed. She had maybe 90 seconds before people recovered. She entered the command center, could barely see despite her night vision goggles compensating for the flash. Bodies everywhere, Marines on the ground, hands over ears, eyes squeezed shut, disoriented, helpless. She moved through them methodically, drew her sidearm loaded with simunition, started firing, each shot deliberate, aimed, professional, chest shots, paint spreading. Each Marine tagged became a casualty by the rules of engagement. Stone was trying to recover. Victoria saw her against a wall, shaking her head, trying to clear her vision. Victoria moved close, fired, paint on Stone's uniform. The major looked up, couldn't see clearly, but she said, "Who are you?" "Someone who keeps their promises." Victoria kept moving, found Sawyer. He was on his feet, reaching for his weapon. She fired twice, paint on his chest. He looked down, looked up, pure rage on his face. "This isn't over." "It is for you, Captain. You're dead. Rules are rules." She found Park. The lieutenant was crouched behind a desk, had managed to avoid most of the flash bang effect, was drawing her weapon, fast, professional. Victoria respected that. She dove, rolled, Park fired, missed by inches. Victoria came up, fired, paint on Park's shoulder. The lieutenant looked at the mark, looked at Victoria. "How?" "Practice, lots of practice." Then Victoria saw him, Captain David Chen, intelligence officer, traitor. He was in the corner of the room behind the others, eyes squeezed shut from the flash bang but recovering faster than most. His hand was moving towards something, not a weapon, a phone, the transmission device. He was going to send an emergency alert to his handlers, right now, while the chaos provided cover. Victoria moved, crossed the room in 4 strides, grabbed his hand before it reached the phone, twisted, applied pressure to the wrist. Chen gasped, opened his eyes, saw her face. Recognition, fear, understanding. He tried to pull away. She increased pressure. A little more and his wrist would break. She didn't increase it. 0 casualties, even for traitors. She leaned close, whispered in his ear so only he could hear. "I know about the transmissions. I know about Beijing. I know everything. And in about 30 seconds, so will everyone else unless you do exactly what I say." Chen's eyes went wide. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. And you're going to stop. You're going to delete every transmission log. You're going to terminate contact with your handlers. And you're going to pray that I don't decide your crimes warrant an exception to my 0 casualty rule." "You can't prove anything." Victoria smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I can't, but NCIS can, and they will. The moment I leave this base, I'm sending them everything. Every transmission, every data packet, every piece of evidence. You'll spend the rest of your life in Leavenworth unless— She paused, let it hang. Unless you become useful, you stop the transmissions. You start feeding false information. You become our asset instead of theirs. Do that, and maybe, just maybe, you get to retire quietly instead of dying in prison. Chen's face went through several emotions: fear, anger, calculation, finally resignation. What do you want me to send them? Tell them the intruder at Fort Irwin is a rogue CIA operative. Tell them it's about domestic terrorism training. Tell them it has nothing to do with any foreign operations. And tell them the threat has been neutralized. Make them stop watching us. They won't believe it. Make them believe it. You're the intelligence expert. Sell it. Your life depends on it, literally. She released his wrist, fired a simunition round into his chest, paint spread. He was officially a casualty now, like everyone else in the room. She stepped back, counted bodies. 40 Marines, all tagged, all down, including Stone, Sawyer, Park, and Chen. The smoke was starting to clear. She needed to move. But first, the message. She pulled out spray paint, wrote on the wall in letters 3 feet tall, 42 more. Ask yourselves if numbers matter when skill doesn't care. Then she was gone, out a side door, into the drainage system, vanishing before the Marines could recover enough to follow. Behind her, she heard coughing, shouting, the sound of 40 people realizing they'd just been taken down by one person who'd walked through their defenses like they were tissue paper. In the drainage pipe, Victoria allowed herself 10 seconds to shake. Adrenaline dump. The come-down from doing something so reckless it bordered on suicidal. She just assaulted the command center, taken down 40 Marines, including both commanders and the intelligence staff. And she'd done it in broad daylight with minimal equipment. The whisper box crackled. Hale's voice. Vic, what the hell just happened? I'm seeing reports of a major incident at Fort Irwin Command Center. I made a statement. Chen will send his transmission in about 12 hours. It'll say exactly what we need it to say. The Chinese will back off. SEAL team will have their window. You confronted Chen. I flipped him. He works for us now, or he goes to prison. His choice was easy. Silence on the line. Then, you're insane, you know that. Insanity is doing the same thing expecting different results. I did something unprecedented. Got unprecedented results. How much time did I buy? SEAL team estimates 10 hours to extract. Chinese forces are distracted by your Fort Irwin chaos. Every intelligence analyst in Beijing is trying to figure out who you are. Chen's false report will seal it. 10 more hours, Vic. Can you hold? Victoria looked at her hands, trembling slightly, looked at her gear. One smoke grenade left. No flash bangs. Quarter magazine of simunition. Whisper box running on backup battery. And a body that was running on fumes, caffeine, and pure willpower. I can hold. Jake's asking about you. Victoria's breath caught. What? SEAL team made contact with the prisoners. Managed to get a message through during a guard change. Jake asked if anyone named Victoria was part of the rescue operation. Team leader told him no. Operational security. But Jake said to tell you if you were somehow involved that he's sorry, and that he was wrong. Victoria closed her eyes. Saw Jake at 19. Saw him at 24. Saw him at 27, zip-tied on a Chinese vessel, beaten and scared but still thinking about his sister. Tell him I'm not involved. Tell him to stay alive. Tell him I'll see him when he gets home. I'll tell him. The connection cut. Victoria sat in the darkness, felt the weight of 40 hours without sleep, felt the ache in muscles pushed beyond limits, felt the certainty that the next 10 hours would be harder than the previous 40 combined because now the Marines knew what they were facing. Now they'd adapt. Now they'd come at her with everything they had. And she'd have to survive it with nothing but skill, determination, and the promise of seeing her brother alive. She checked her watch. 62 hours into the mission, 10 hours to go, 36 Marines remaining who weren't casualties. They'd be reorganizing now, figuring out new tactics, probably bringing in reinforcements from other sections of Fort Irwin. The rules of the exercise didn't matter anymore. This was personal. 84 Marines taken down by one person. That kind of humiliation demanded response. Victoria crawled deeper into the drainage system, found a junction point where 3 pipes met, defensible, multiple escape routes. She set up a small camp, ate an energy bar that tasted like cardboard, drank water that was getting low, let herself close her eyes for 15 minutes, not sleep, just rest. The kind of half-conscious state where you're aware of everything but letting your body recover just enough to keep going. When she opened her eyes, the whisper box was receiving new traffic. She tuned in, Park's voice. The lieutenant had survived the command center assault and apparently taken command in Stone and Sawyer's absence. Smart, capable, dangerous. All units knew protocol. We're done chasing. We're done reacting. From this point forward, we set up a defensive perimeter around critical infrastructure. Water, power, food supplies. We wait. The intruder has to come to us eventually. When they do, we're ready. A male voice. Corporal Danny Chen, one of the younger Marines. Lieutenant, what if they don't come? What if they just hide? Park's response was cold, professional. The voice of someone who'd figured out the game. Then they've already lost, because the mission isn't to hide, it's to distract us. Keep us focused here instead of wondering what's happening somewhere else. So we give them what they want. We stay focused. We stay engaged, but on our terms, not theirs. Victoria smiled in the darkness. Park had figured it out. Not all of it, but enough. The lieutenant knew this was bigger than Fort Irwin, knew there was a secondary objective, and instead of calling it out, instead of reporting up the chain, she was playing along, keeping her Marines engaged, maintaining the distraction. Either Park was incredibly loyal to whoever ordered this operation, or she understood that sometimes the mission was bigger than the questions you weren't supposed to ask. Either way, she just made the next 10 hours exponentially harder, because now Victoria couldn't just avoid them. She had to actively engage, had to keep them focused, had to make them believe she was still a threat even as her resources dwindled to nothing. She pulled out her tablet, started planning. 10 hours, 36 Marines, limited ammunition, no explosives, just her mind and her body and her willingness to push both past the breaking point. She looked at the base map, at Park's new defensive positions, at the gaps, at the opportunities, at the risks. And she started moving, because somewhere in the South China Sea, 4 SEALs were waiting for a miracle, and Victoria Cross had never failed a mission yet. Wasn't about to start now. Not when one of those SEALs was family. Not when Jake's apology was waiting at the end of this nightmare. Not when 10 more hours was all that stood between her and the brother she thought she'd lost forever. 10 hours. She could hold for 10 hours. She'd held for worse, for longer, in conditions that made Fort Irwin look like a vacation. She'd hold because that's what operators did. They held the line, no matter the cost, no matter the odds, no matter how tired or hurt or scared they were. They held, and then they went home, and Victoria Cross was going home, with her brother, alive, together, the way it should have been 3 years ago before pride and anger and miscommunication tore them apart. 10 hours. She checked her gear one final time, started moving toward her next objective, toward the next impossible task, toward the end of the mission or the end of her. Either way, she was moving forward, because that's all she knew how to do, Move forward, complete the mission. Save the people who needed saving. Even if it killed her, especially if it killed her, because some things were worth dying for, and family was at the top of that very short list. 8 hours remained when Victoria's body began its quiet rebellion. She was moving through a drainage pipe toward the water treatment facility when her left hand cramped so violently she dropped the whisper box. The device clattered against concrete. She froze, listened. No sounds above, no indication anyone had heard. She picked up the device with her right hand, tried to unclench her left. The muscles refused. Locked tight from 64 hours of stress, dehydration, and the kind of physical exertion that breaks normal humans. She wasn't normal, had never been normal, but even abnormal has limits, and Victoria Cross was brushing against hers. She forced her fingers open one at a time, massaged the cramped muscle, drank the last of her water. The canteen was empty now. She'd need to refill at the treatment facility, assuming she could reach it. Assuming the 36 remaining Marines hadn't figured out that water was the only resource she absolutely needed. The whisper box crackled, Park's voice. The lieutenant had taken full command after Stone and Sawyer were tagged as casualties. Her tactical mind was sharp, sharper than Victoria had anticipated. All units, the intruder will need water soon. 64 hours without resupply. Human body can't maintain this level of activity on empty. We control all water sources. We wait. Corporal Chen's voice. What if they have their own supply? Park, then they're smarter than we thought, but even smart people make mistakes when they're exhausted. We've been rotating rest. They haven't. Fatigue is our ally now. We just have to be patient. Victoria closed her eyes, opened them. The world swam slightly before focusing. Fatigue, yes, that was the technical term, the polite term. The reality was uglier, hallucinations starting at the edges, reaction time degrading, fine motor control compromised. She was breaking down, slowly, inevitably, like a machine pushed past its design specifications. But machines didn't have brothers waiting in the South China Sea. Machines didn't make promises to family. Machines didn't understand that 8 more hours was nothing compared to 3 years of silence. She'd crawl these last 8 hours if she had to, on broken hands and bleeding knees, because quitting wasn't in her vocabulary. Never had been, never would be. She reached the water treatment facility from below, found an access panel, opened it. Inside, the machinery hummed, pumps, filters, thousands of gallons of clean water flowing through pipes to supply Fort Irwin's needs, and standing guard around the facility she could see through small gaps in the ductwork 12 Marines, a third of Park's remaining force, all watching, all waiting, all fresh from rotation while Victoria ran on fumes and willpower. The smart move was retreat, find another water source, conserve energy, but there was no other water source, not within the base, not accessible without exposing herself. This was the choke point. Park had chosen it deliberately. Come here or die of dehydration. Simple, effective. The kind of trap that worked because it exploited basic biology. Victoria studied the facility layout through the gaps. 12 Marines in defensive positions, overlapping fields of fire, no blind spots, no easy approach. But there was something Park hadn't considered. Victoria wasn't trying to take the facility. She just needed water, and water was already flowing through pipes all around her. She pulled out her knife, found a water main. The pipe was 2 inches in diameter, steel, old. She pressed the blade against it, started cutting, not through the pipe. That would take hours. Instead, she cut around a fitting where the pipe connected to a junction. The metal was thinner there, weaker. The knife bit in. She worked quietly, each stroke deliberate, each movement calculated to minimize noise. 5 minutes later, she'd cut enough to loosen the fitting. Water pressure did the rest. The joints separated slightly. Water sprayed out. She caught it in her canteen. Cold, clean, life. She drank half immediately, felt it hit her stomach, felt her body absorb it like desert sand soaking up rain, filled the canteen again, sealed the fitting as best she could with tape from her kit. The seal wasn't perfect. Water still leaked, but slowly. By the time anyone noticed, she'd be gone. Above her, one of the Marines said, "You hear something." Another voice, "Just the pumps. Place is always making noise." Victoria moved away from the leak, back into the drainage system. 8 hours. She had water now, had bought herself time, but time for what? She couldn't keep taking down Marines. She was down to maybe 10 simunition rounds. Her body was failing. Her mind was starting to play tricks. Twice in the last hour she'd seen movement that wasn't there. Once she'd heard her mother's voice calling her name. Auditory hallucination. Classic symptom of extreme sleep deprivation. The mission was almost over. SEAL Team 6 just needed a few more hours. Then they'd extract Jake and the others. Then Victoria could stop, could rest, could face whatever consequences waited for her. Court-martial probably, prison possibly. She didn't care. Jake would be alive. That was all that mattered. Everything else was just details. The whisper box crackled again. Different frequency this time, encrypted. Hale's voice, "Reaper, we have a situation." Victoria's stomach dropped. Situation was never good. Situation meant something had gone wrong. Go ahead. SEAL team made it to the prisoners, got Jake and 2 others out. But the 4th SEAL, Lieutenant Morrison, is badly injured. Gunshot wound to the abdomen. He can't move on his own. Team is pinned down in the extraction corridor. Chinese forces closing in. They need 30 more minutes to get Morrison stable enough to move. 30 minutes? I can hold 30 minutes. Vic, there's more. Chinese intelligence just received Chen's report. They're not buying it. They're deploying additional naval assets to the South China Sea. If those assets arrive before SEAL team extracts, everyone dies. Morrison, Jake, the whole team. We need to delay those assets. And the only way to delay them is to create an incident so big that Beijing has to divert attention back to Fort Irwin. Victoria processed this through a brain running on backup power. You want me to escalate? I want you to make them think Fort Irwin is under actual attack. Not by one person, by a full team. Make it big enough that China thinks the U.S. is conducting a major domestic military operation. Big enough that they pull resources from the South China Sea to watch what happens in California. That violates the zero casualty rule. People will get hurt. Not if you're as good as I think you are. 30 minutes. Create maximum chaos. No deaths. Then extract. We'll have a helicopter waiting at LZ Bravo 10 clicks north of the base. Can you do it? Victoria thought about Morrison bleeding in a corridor half a world away. Thought about Jake carrying him. Thought about 36 Marines who'd been chasing her for 64 hours and were probably ready to shoot first and ask questions never. Thought about the fact that she was hallucinating and cramping and running on empty. Yes. That's my girl. Clock starts now. 30 minutes, make it count. The connection cut. Victoria sat in the darkness of the drainage pipe and laughed. Once. Short. Sharp. The sound of someone who'd been asked to do the impossible so many times it had become routine. 30 minutes. Maximum chaos. No casualties. With 10 rounds of simunition and a body that was actively shutting down. She pulled out her tablet, looked at the base map. 36 Marines spread across defensive positions. She couldn't take them all down. Not in 30 minutes. Not in her condition. But she didn't need to take them down. She just needed to make them think they were under attack by a force too large to be one person. Needed to create the illusion of overwhelming threat. Fire would do it. Not actual fire. That would cause casualties, but smoke. Lots of smoke. If she could trigger fire alarms across the entire base simultaneously, evacuation protocols would activate. Chaos would ensue. Marines would scramble to respond. and satellite imagery would show a base in emergency mode. China would see it, would wonder, would divert attention. Victoria started moving, fast. Faster than she'd moved in hours. Her body protested. She ignored it, reached the first building, found the fire alarm, pulled it, alarm shrieked. She was already running to the next building, pulled that alarm. Then the next. Then the next. 4 buildings, 4 alarms, all screaming. Marines poured out of defensive positions. Confusion, shouting, some heading toward the alarms, some maintaining positions. Park's voice cutting through on radios, "Stay at your posts, this is a diversion." Smart, but Victoria was already at the generator facility, the backup power system for the entire base. She'd scouted it on day 1, knew the layout, knew the vulnerabilities. She found the control panel. No guards, they were all responding to the alarms. She opened the panel, looked at the circuit breakers, started flipping them, not all of them. That would shut down critical systems, medical, communications, just enough to kill the lights in half the base. Darkness fell across sectors 1 through 4. More shouting, more chaos, Marines switching to night vision, flashlights cutting through the dark. Victoria moved to the vehicle depot, found 3 Humvees, hot-wired them using a technique she'd learned from a car thief turned army mechanic, started all 3 engines, put bricks on the accelerators, aimed them toward different sections of the base, let them go. 3 driverless Humvees roaring through Fort Irwin, alarms screaming, lights out, fire protocols activated. It looked like an assault, felt like an assault. From orbit, from satellite imagery, it would be impossible to tell this was one woman with a death wish instead of a coordinated team. She headed toward her final objective, the ammunition depot, not to steal ammunition, to make them think someone was trying to steal ammunition. She reached the depot. It was heavily guarded, 8 Marines, all on high alert, all armed, all very ready to shoot anything that moved. Victoria didn't approach directly. Instead, she climbed onto a nearby roof, found a good angle, pulled out her last smoke grenade, modified it the same way she'd modified the others, threw it toward the depot. It landed, detonated, thick smoke poured out. The 8 Marines opened fire, not at Victoria, at the smoke, at the perceived threat. Simunition rounds and live rounds. They couldn't tell in the chaos. They just shot. Victoria recorded it on her tablet. The footage showed Marines firing into smoke at Fort Irwin's ammunition depot. Looked exactly like a firefight. She sent the footage to Hale, compressed, encrypted, with a message, "Sell this to Beijing, make them believe." Then she ran, because 8 Marines were about to realize they'd been shooting at smoke, and when they did, they'd be very angry. She made it 50 meters before the first shots came after her. Real shots, live ammunition. Someone had decided the rules of engagement no longer applied. Someone had decided she was a genuine threat that needed to be stopped with lethal force. A round cracked past her head. Close, too close. She dove behind a building. More rounds impacted where she'd been. She was being hunted now. Not by Marines playing a training exercise. By Marines who thought they were defending their base from an actual attack. She'd succeeded, created maximum chaos, made it look real. So real that she'd convince people to kill her. The irony would have been funny if she wasn't currently trying not to die. She ran toward the perimeter, toward the drainage pipe that would take her outside the base, toward LZ Bravo where a helicopter was supposed to be waiting. Supposed to be. If Hale had arranged it, if the timing worked, if she could cover 10 kilometers in whatever time she had left. Behind her, organized pursuit. She could hear Park coordinating. The lieutenant had figured out Victoria's escape vector, was directing Marines to cut her off. Victoria reached the drainage pipe, dove inside, crawled as fast as exhaustion allowed. Behind her, flashlight beams cut into the pipe entrance, voices shouting to pursue. She crawled harder, ignoring the pain in her hands, the cramping in her legs, the way her vision was tunneling. 300 meters of pipe between her and freedom. She'd crawled through worse. Through insurgent tunnels in Fallujah with Jake behind her and hostiles ahead. Through sewers in Baghdad with a bullet wound in her side. Through hell itself when the mission demanded it. 300 meters. She could do 300 meters. Could do it on willpower alone if her body finally gave up. 200 meters, footsteps behind her, Marines entering the pipe, faster than her, fresher. She was going to be caught, going to fail, going to let Jake down after 64 hours of holding the line. 100 meters, the footsteps closer, voices. She recognized Park's voice. Don't shoot, we take her alive, she's earned that much. 50 meters, Victoria could see light ahead, the exit, the desert beyond, so close, but her body was done, legs refusing to respond, arms barely moving. She pulled herself forward with fingernails scraping concrete, inch by inch, foot by foot. 20 meters, hands grabbed her ankle, she kicked, connected with something, heard a grunt. The hand released. She crawled 10 meters, 5, the exit was right there, she reached for it. And then she was outside, under stars, in cool desert air. She stood on legs that shouldn't have been able to hold her, turned, saw Marines emerging from the pipe behind her, Park in the lead. The lieutenant stopped, looked at Victoria, looked at the darkness beyond, made a decision. Let her go. Corporal Chen, ma'am, we have her, we can end this. Park shook her head. Look at her, she's done. She held off 120 Marines for 64 hours, took down 84 of us, never killed anyone. She's earned the right to walk away. Park looked at Victoria, something like respect in her eyes. Go, before I change my mind. Victoria nodded, once, a warrior's acknowledgement to another warrior. Then she turned and ran into the darkness or tried to run. Her body had other ideas. She made it 100 meters before her legs gave out. She fell, got up, fell again, got up again, kept moving, because 10 kilometers wasn't far, because a helicopter was waiting, because Jake was alive, and that made everything worth it. She covered the first kilometer in 20 minutes, a pace that would have been embarrassing if she'd had energy left for embarrassment. The second kilometer took 30 minutes. She was stumbling now, falling every 100 meters. Her body was shutting down, system by system, muscle by muscle. The only thing still working was her brain, and even that was starting to fray. At kilometer 3, she heard the helicopter, distant, getting closer, the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. She pulled out a chemlight, cracked it, waved it overhead. The helicopter adjusted course, headed toward her, landed 50 meters away, downdraft whipping sand into miniature tornadoes. Hale jumped out before the skids touched down, ran to her, caught her as she fell. I've got you, you did it. SEAL team extracted 10 minutes ago. Jake's alive, Morrison's stable, everyone's coming home. Victoria tried to respond, couldn't. Her voice was gone, throat raw from 64 hours of breathing dust and smoke. She let Hale carry her to the helicopter, let him strap her into a seat, let the medic attach an IV, fluids flooding into her system. Too late to matter now, but better late than never. The helicopter lifted off. Fort Irwin fell away below. She could see the lights, the chaos, the base she'd torn apart for 64 hours, could see tiny figures searching, Park probably, still hunting even though the hunt was over, professional to the end. Hale sat next to her, held her hand, the one that wasn't cramped. Chen's report went out, Beijing bought it, diverted 3 naval vessels to monitor U.S. West Coast activity. That gave SEAL team the window they needed. You saved them, Vic, saved all of them. She wanted to ask about Jake, wanted to know if he was hurt, if he'd asked about her, if the apology was real or just something said in desperation, but her voice still wouldn't work. Hale saw the question in her eyes. Jake's asking for you. He's on a hospital ship right now. 2 broken ribs, dehydrated, but alive, thanks to you. They're flying him to San Diego. You'll see him there. San Diego, 3 hours away. Victoria closed her eyes, let exhaustion take her. For the first time in 64 hours, she let herself stop fighting, let herself rest, let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd done enough, been enough, survived enough. She woke up in a hospital bed. White walls, white ceiling, white sheets, everything clean and sterile and safe. So different from drainage pipes and darkness and danger. An IV in her arm, monitors beeping softly. Her body ached, every muscle screaming, but she was alive, whole, unbroken in the ways that mattered. Hale sat in a chair by the window, reading a file. He looked up when she stirred, smiled. "Welcome back. You've been out for 18 hours. Doctors say you had complete physical exhaustion, dehydration, early stages of rhabdomyolysis. Your kidneys were starting to shut down. Another few hours and you would have died." Victoria's voice came out as a croak, "But I didn't." "No, you didn't, because you're too stubborn to die." He put down the file, moved closer. "The debrief can wait, but you should know. Fort Irwin is calling you a legend. Park submitted a report, said she'd never seen anything like it, said you should be teaching at every military academy in the country. And the truth? The truth stays classified. Officially, there was a security test at Fort Irwin, an evaluation of base defenses. You were a contractor, everything is explained, everything is buried. Chen is cooperating fully, feeding false intelligence to Beijing. Sawyer and Stone want to meet you. Thank you for showing them their weaknesses." "Jake." Hale stood, walked to the door, opened it. "He's been waiting." Jake Cross walked in, 27 years old, thinner than Victoria remembered. Bandages around his ribs, bruises on his face, but his eyes, those were the same eyes, their mother's eyes, the eyes that said he'd rather die than quit. He stopped just inside the door, looked at his sister, really looked, maybe seeing her for the first time in 3 years. "Hi, Vic." "Hi, Jake." Silence, the kind that's heavy with 3 years of things unsaid, 3 years of anger and pride and regret. Jake broke it first. "I heard what you did at Fort Irwin. Hale told me. 64 hours, 120 Marines. You did that for us, for me. You're my brother." "I said I didn't have a sister 3 years ago. I said terrible things." "You were angry. You had a right to be." Jake shook his head, moved closer, sat in the chair Hale had vacated. "No, I was wrong. You refused to kill an innocent woman. That wasn't cowardice. That was courage, real courage. The kind I didn't understand because I was too busy following orders to think about what the orders meant. And I lost you because of it. Lost 3 years with the only family I have." Victoria felt tears she didn't know she had. "You were captured because of me. If I'd stayed in, if I'd kept working black ops, I could have prevented it, could have been there. Or you'd have been captured too, or killed. Vic, you saved my life, not just last week, all my life. You taught me to shoot, taught me to fight, taught me to never quit. I'm alive because of you. Everything I am is because of you, and I threw that away over pride. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." She reached out, took his hand. The same hand she'd held when he was a scared kid at boot camp, when he'd asked if she'd always be there. She'd promised always, had meant it then, meant it now. "You're here, that's all that matters. You're here and we have time, time to fix what broke, time to be family again." Jake squeezed her hand. "I'd like that, if you'll have me, if you can forgive what I said." "Already forgiven. The moment you said it, I just didn't know how to tell you." They sat like that, brother and sister, reunited by fire and blood in 64 hours of one woman holding the line against impossible odds. The monitors beeped, the hospital hummed. Outside, the world turned. But in this room, time stopped. Let them have this moment, this reconciliation, this family. Hale cleared his throat from the doorway. I hate to interrupt, but Vic, there's something you need to know. The Pentagon reviewed your performance, everything you did. They're offering you a position, training command, teaching the next generation of operators everything you know. No more field work unless you want it, full reinstatement, honorable service record. The discharge is being reversed. You'll get your rank back, your benefits, everything. Victoria looked at Jake, at the brother who'd come back from the dead, looked at Hale, at the mentor who'd never stopped believing in her, looked at her hands, at the scars and calluses and damage from 64 hours of doing the impossible. What about the moral code, the thing that got me discharged in the first place? That's exactly why they want you. You prove that skill without ethics is just violence, that the mission matters but people matter more. That sometimes the hardest thing isn't pulling the trigger, it's refusing to. They want operators who understand that, who can teach it, who can build a military that's not just effective but righteous. Jake spoke up. Take it, Vic. You're done proving yourself. You're done sacrificing. Let someone else carry the weight for a while. Train them. Guide them. Be the voice that stops them from making the mistakes I made. The mistakes we all make when we forget why we're fighting. Victoria thought about the cabin in Montana, about the quiet life she'd built from wreckage, about wood that needed splitting and solitude that never judged. But she also thought about Park, about the young lieutenant who'd figured out the game and played it honorably, about Corporal Chen who'd asked good questions, about a generation of warriors who deserved better than blind obedience, deserved someone who'd show them that strength and morality weren't opposites, were complements. I'll do it on one condition. Jake joins the program, becomes an instructor too. We do this together, the way we should have done everything. Jake's eyes went wide. I'm just a lieutenant, I don't have your experience. You have something better. You have the perspective of someone who followed orders blindly and learned the cost. You can teach them what I can't, the view from the other side, the regret, the growth. Together, we make them complete. Hale smiled. I think the Pentagon will agree to that. Hell, I think they'll jump at it, the Cross siblings, legends both, teaching the next generation, it's perfect. He pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke quietly, hung up. It's done. You both start in 6 weeks. Fort Bragg, Joint Training Command. You'll build the curriculum from scratch. Your vision, your rules, your legacy. Legacy? Victoria turned the word over in her mind. She'd spent 15 years being a ghost, a shadow, a name whispered in corridors that officially didn't exist. Now she'd be a teacher, a mentor, a face. It felt wrong and exactly right. The next evolution, the final mission, not destroying, building. 6 weeks, we'll be ready. Jake stood, pulled Victoria up, careful of her IV, careful of her bruised and battered body, hugged her, gentle but fierce. The hug of someone who'd lost something precious and found it again. Thank you for not giving up on me, for coming after me, for being the person I forgot you were. Always, little brother, always. 3 months later, Fort Bragg Training Facility. 40 operators sat in a classroom. Marines, SEALs, Rangers, Delta, the best of the best, chosen for their skills but also their potential, their ability to learn, to grow, to become something more than just weapons. Lieutenant Colonel Victoria Cross stood at the front, Jake beside her, both in uniform, both wearing instructor insignia, both looking at 40 faces that reminded them of themselves at different ages, eager, confident, unaware of how much they didn't know. Victoria spoke first. Welcome to Advanced Combat Ethics and Tactics. You're here because someone thought you had potential. My job over the next 12 weeks is to prove them right or wrong. This isn't a normal course. We're not just teaching you how to fight. We're teaching you how to think, how to question, how to refuse when refusing is the right answer. One of the operators raised his hand. Young, maybe 24, reminded Victoria of Jake at that age. "Ma'am, how can we refuse orders? We're military, we follow orders." Victoria smiled. "You follow lawful orders, the difference matters. 8 months ago I was ordered to kill an innocent woman. The order was unlawful, immoral, wrong. I refused. It cost me my career, my rank, my brother, everything I'd built. And I'd do it again tomorrow, because some things matter more than careers, more than orders, more than missions." Stepped forward. "I was on the other side of that story. I thought my sister was a coward for refusing. I cut her out of my life, told her she wasn't family anymore, and then I got captured in the South China Sea. Beaten, held prisoner, facing execution. And you know who saved me? The sister I'd disowned. The woman I'd called a coward. She infiltrated a military base. Held off 120 Marines for 64 hours, without killing anyone, without breaking her moral code. She did the impossible because she believed in something bigger than orders, bigger than pride. She believed in family, in honor, in doing right even when it costs everything." The classroom was silent, 40 operators processing, understanding, maybe for the first time. That strength wasn't just physical, that courage wasn't just facing fire, that the hardest battles were the ones fought inside, against ourselves, against our training, against the part of us that just wanted simple answers in a complex world. Victoria continued. "Over the next 12 weeks, we're going to put you in situations where the right answer isn't clear, where the mission and morality conflict, where you'll have to choose. Some of you will choose wrong. That's okay. That's learning. What's not okay is choosing without thinking, following without questioning, becoming a weapon instead of a warrior. Warriors think. Weapons don't. We're building warriors." The training was brutal, physically and mentally. Operators were put in scenarios where they had to infiltrate, extract, complete missions, all with the constraint of 0 casualties, where they learned that violence was easy and restraint was hard, where they failed and failed and failed until they finally understood what Victoria had learned over 15 years, that being the best meant being the most controlled, the most precise, the most moral. Lieutenant Sarah Park joined the instruction team in week 4. She'd been promoted to captain, had requested assignment to the program, said she wanted to learn from the woman who'd made her entire unit look like amateurs. She and Victoria developed a mutual respect, the kind that forms between people who have faced each other across impossible odds and both walked away better for it. Major Rachel Stone visited in week 8, gave a guest lecture on defensive tactics, told the story of Fort Irwin from her perspective, the frustration, the anger, the grudging respect that grew as Victoria systematically dismantled every defense they'd built, told them that defeat was the best teacher if you had the humility to learn. Captain Ethan Sawyer came in week 10, spoke about leadership under pressure, about making decisions with incomplete information, about the difference between stubbornness and determination, about how one woman had shown him that the Marine Corps' best asset wasn't firepower or numbers, it was adaptability, and he'd been too rigid to see it until she forced him to. By week 12, the 40 operators had transformed, not in body, they'd arrived fit, but in mind, in perspective, in understanding. They'd learned to think before acting, to question before obeying, to value life above mission when the mission demanded death. They'd become what Victoria and Jake had envisioned, warriors with conscience, operators with ethics. The next generation built better than the last. On graduation day, Hale attended, watched as 40 operators received their certifications, advanced combat ethics and tactics, a designation that would follow them through their careers, a mark that said they'd been trained by the best, by legends, by people who'd walked through fire and come out believing in something bigger than themselves. After the ceremony, Hale pulled Victoria aside. "I'm proud of you, of what you've built here, of who you've become. I'm just teaching what you taught me. What you and Cole and everyone who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. No, you're teaching what you learned. Big difference. I taught tactics. You're teaching wisdom. That's rarer, more valuable. This program is going to change the military. Already has. Pentagon is expanding it. 5 more locations. 200 operators per year. All using your curriculum, your vision, your legacy. Victoria looked at the graduates, at Jake talking to a group of them, answering questions, sharing stories, being the mentor he'd never had, being the brother she'd always known he could be. It's not my legacy, it's ours, mine and Jake's, everyone who contributed, everyone who believed that we could be better. Do better, that's the legacy, not one person, all of us. That evening, Victoria and Jake sat on a bench outside the training facility, watching the sun set over Fort Bragg, the same base where Victoria had been discharged 8 months ago, where her career had ended and begun again. Differently. Better. You think Mom would be proud? Jake asked quietly. Their mother had died 10 years ago, cancer, fast and brutal, but she'd lived long enough to see both her children in uniform, both serving, both honoring the family tradition of military service that went back 4 generations. I think she'd say we took the long way around, but yeah, she'd be proud, not of what we did, of who we became, of the fact that we found each other again. Family first, that's what she always said. We forgot for a while, but we remembered. Because you wouldn't let me go, even when I told you to, even when it would have been easier to just move on. You held on. That's pure Mom, pure stubborn cross genetics. Victoria smiled. Stubborn kept me alive 64 hours at Fort Irwin. Stubborn brought you home. Stubborn built this program. I'll take stubborn. It's worked out okay. They sat in comfortable silence. The kind siblings share when words aren't necessary, when presence is enough. The sun dropped below the horizon. Stars emerged. The same stars that had watched over Victoria in the Montana wilderness, in the drainage pipes of Fort Irwin, on the helicopter ride to safety. Constant, unchanging, witnesses to everything. Jake stood, offered his hand, pulled Victoria up. Come on, I'm buying dinner, and you're going to tell me every detail of Fort Irwin, every move, every decision. I want to learn it all, so I can teach it better. You want to learn how to take down 120 Marines in 64 hours. I want to learn how my sister became a legend, how she turned defeat into victory, how she saved my life and found herself in the process. That's the story worth knowing. That's the lesson worth teaching. They walked toward the dining facility. Brother and sister, instructors, warriors, survivors. Behind them, the training ground stood empty. Tomorrow it would fill again with new operators, new students, new warriors learning that strength without wisdom is just violence, that following orders without conscience is just obedience, that the hardest missions aren't the ones that test your body but the ones that test your soul. And Victoria Cross, the woman who'd refused to kill an innocent who'd been disowned by her brother, who'd held off 120 Marines with nothing but skill and will, who'd brought her brother home from the dead, would be there to teach them, to guide them, to show them that legends aren't born, they're forged, in fire, in pain, in the choices made when everything is on the line and the easy answer is wrong and the right answer costs everything. She'd paid that cost, earned that wisdom, and now she'd pass it on, one operator at a time, one lesson at a time, one generation at a time, building something that would outlast her, outlast Jake, outlast all of them. A legacy not of destruction but of conscience, not of victories but of values, not of what they'd destroyed but what they'd built. And in a cabin in Montana, wood still waited to be split. A quiet life still waited to be lived. Someday, when the teaching was done, when the next generation was ready, when she could rest knowing she'd left the military better than she'd found it. But not yet. Not today. Today there were students to teach, lessons to share, a brother to work beside, a future to build. And Victoria Cross had never walked away from a mission, not when it mattered, not when lives depended on it, not when she could still make a difference. So she wouldn't start now. She'd keep teaching, keep building, keep fighting the fight that mattered most, not against enemies abroad but against the darkness inside that made good people do bad things in the name of following orders. She'd shine light on that darkness, show others the way through, be the voice that said no when no was the hardest word to speak. That was her mission now, her final operation, and like everything Victoria Cross had ever done, she'd complete it, or die trying, preferably complete it. She'd had enough of almost dying to last a lifetime. Teaching was safer, quieter, better. And as she walked into the dining facility with her brother, as she heard the chatter of operators discussing tactics and ethics and the fine line between following orders and following conscience, she knew she'd made the right choice. The only choice. The choice that let her sleep at night knowing she was building something that mattered. Legacy wasn't about what you destroyed. It was about what you built. And Victoria Cross was building warriors who would change the world, one moral decision at a time, one refused unlawful order at a time, one saved life at a time. That was enough, more than enough. That was everything.